I just want to welcome our speaker, Uriah Orland. Before I do that, I also want to point out that we have a number of materials available on the table outside. So pick them up, share them as you go out. We have a newly updated citizen information brochure. This blue brochure has the contact information for all of our local elected officials. And then this has a link to the voter guide, which is also on our website. And I want to remind everyone that we will next convene for a municipal election candidate forum on March 18th in this same space at 6 p.m. So please avail yourselves of all that. And I'm going to abridge your introduction a little bit. I won't do you justice, but Uriah Orland is the Director of Communications at the University of Missouri Research Reactor here in Columbia. In this capacity, he's responsible for developing effective internal and external messaging and communication strategies and leads the communications team. He serves as an official spokesperson for MU Research Reactor, and in coordination with the MU Public Affairs Office, responds to media and public queries about MURR policy and issues. In 2022, he retired as a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Air Force after serving 20 years as a public affairs officer. He entered the Air Force in May 2002 as a graduate of the U.S. Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, and he has served in multiple service, joint, and coalition public affairs positions. And he's a graduate of the National Intelligence University, where he graduated with a Master of Science and Technology Intelligence degree. So we're very happy to have him come and let us know all about what's going on at the MU Research Reactor.
Great, thank you so much. All right, so we're good with video and Zoom. I'm going to try not to wander too much. But for those in the room, how many of you are familiar with MURR or have been out there or know about what we do? Okay, most of the room. All right, hopefully online it's kind of the same. So I'm happy to give an update today, but I'm going to start with a video, which is probably part of the technology issue that we've had is the audio for the videos. So hopefully this will work, and then we'll proceed from there.
From its proud home in Columbia, Missouri, the University of Missouri is one of the most important and reliable producers of medical isotopes for treating cancer in the United States. The University of Missouri Research Reactor, known as MURR, is the only U.S. producer of 4 critical medical isotopes. Researchers at MURR create radioisotopes that are used to diagnose cancers and heart disease, and in the treatment of liver, thyroid, pancreatic, and prostate cancers. These are life-saving treatments that those with cancer desperately need. MURR's central location and unique capabilities ensure rapid transportation of radioisotopes to more than 1.6 million patients a year across the nation and beyond. The demand for radioisotopes is rapidly increasing, however, and work must begin on a new, larger reactor, Next-Gen MURR. Next-Gen MURR will solidify the University of Missouri's position as one of the most important sources of radioisotopes, while expanding critical cancer-fighting research and medical isotope production for generations to come. Without a new reactor, these critical radioisotopes may not be available in the U.S. in the future, leading to dependency on foreign sources. Despite their minute size, radioisotopes create massive opportunities in the treatment and imaging of numerous cancers and diseases. But how do they work? A radioactive compound produced at MURR is linked to a targeting molecule that seeks out certain proteins on a tumor. The compound, linker, and targeting molecule form a radiopharmaceutical. Cutting-edge science and medicine meet when the radiopharmaceutical is administered into the body and sticks to cancer cells. The radioisotopes release energy that acts as a wrecking ball to cancer cells, eventually destroying them while leaving healthy cells unaffected. As a result of this advanced treatment, patients have the ability to resume a vibrant and healthy life. For more than 50 years, MURR has operated safely and has been at the center of advancements in science and medicine. Next-Gen MURR will take us further into the future, providing accessible and life-saving innovation for generations.
Okay, How many of you have heard of next gen MURR and the new reactor? All right, 2 hands. So good, new information for us today. That's great. Well, I'm going to start first with the distinction, because a lot of times people hear a research reactor or think nuclear reactor and they think power. So Callaway Power Plant is just east of Fulton, about 40 minutes from Columbia. Callaway does power. MURR does not do power. All the power for the campus is provided by the power plant that's up on the hill here at Locust Street. Down at the research reactor, we produce neutrons. So the distinction between us and power are several different things. So first is the size or the amount of power that's there. So MURR operates at 10 megawatts. Callaway operates at 3,600 megawatts thermal. So a very large difference in the size of the reactors. But a power plant really likes the heat that comes off of a nuclear reaction. With the heat, they boil water that creates steam. The steam turns a turbine, powers a generator, produces electricity. Nuclear power doesn't like the byproduct that comes off of a fission reaction. They don't like the radiation. They don't like the neutrons that come off it. That's all problematic for them. At MURR, we don't care at all about the heat. We vent the heat off to the atmosphere. If you drive down the hill from the stadium on Providence and you look to the right, there's a cooling tower. You'll see it on a winter day producing some steam. We don't produce that much heat at all. But we really like the byproduct of the fission reaction. So the neutrons and the radiation that comes off of that allows us to do what we do with research, with producing the radioisotopes that are used for cancer fighting drugs, and they're used in other industry and research purposes. So we really love neutrons at Mizzou. But MURR is really unique in the world. And it's unique for several reasons. One is that operating power. So 10 megawatts, we are the largest university research reactor in the country. So Mizzou is #1, which is awesome. We always like that. The design of the reactor is very unique too. So the schematic in the center here is a schematic of the reactor. And right in the center, that light gray, there's kind of 8 wedge-shaped light gray blocks there. Those are what we call the fuel elements. So that's the fuel of the reactor. And because they're in that annual configuration or in that circle, it concentrates the neutrons into the center of the reactor, which allows us to make the radioisotopes that we do for cancer drugs. If you think about the power of the reactor, it's kind of like a microwave. When you get your bag of steamed vegetables and you want to cook them in the microwave, you turn it over and you look at the back. And it says if you have an 800-watt microwave, you have to cook it for this amount of time. If you have an 1,100-watt microwave, you have to cook it for less time. But if you look at the back of a pot pie, it says do not cook in a microwave less than 1,100 watts. Why? Because there's not enough power in the microwave to cook it all the way through. Research reactors or reactors are kind of the same way. If you don't have the right neutron concentration, what we call flux, neutron flux, then you don't have enough power to make the isotopes that you need. So you're never going to cook that atom to where you need it to produce what you need. So that design and the power allows us to make those isotopes for the cancer drugs that other research reactors around the country can't do because they don't have that neutron flux and that power. Our operating schedule is also very unique in the world. So MURR operates 24 hours a day, 6.5 days a week, every week of the year. So as part of the university, they take spring break off, they take summer break off, MURR is still working. Christmas Day, New Year's Day, the reactor is operating. What that allows us to do is it allows us to have that reliable source of neutrons to make those cancer drugs. What we make today literally is administered to patients before next week. And that's really important when it comes to cancer drugs because it means that patients don't have to wait. When I say 6.5 days of operating cycle, what that means is every Sunday night at 10 p.m. we shut the reactor down and we take the material, the target material out of the reactor, we do refuel, we do maintenance, and Monday afternoon, we put new target material in, and Monday afternoon, we start the reactor back up. So we run every day of the week. The isotopes that we make can't be stockpiled. They can't be stored long-term. So what we make this week, every isotope has a half-life, and that half-life means that it's like an ice cube, that as soon as it comes out of the reactor, it starts to melt. So we make really big ice cubes so that we can do our processing on it, send it to a drug company, they do their processing on it, and they send it to a hospital where it gets administered to the patient. And we want that ice cube to be the right size for when it hits the patient so that they get an effective dose of medicine, not too much, not over radiation, and not under, which would be an ineffective dose. So that's the math that we play every week when we make these isotopes, is how big of an ice cube do we make to be able to get it to the patient the right size. If we're not producing, then patients, we either have to import those isotopes from overseas, as the video said, or the patients go without. So that reliability of running every day of the year is really important, because the doctors in oncology know that they can tell a patient, you're scheduled for Thursday, and they have trust and confidence that the drugs will be available for them to treat on Thursday. So Mizzou's and MURR are really important in that regard, and a great pride point for Columbia. And we are the only U.S. source. As the video said, we're the only U.S. source for 4 medical isotopes, and we'll talk about those in this presentation. When we look at university research reactors, and I apologize for the font, apparently the university purchases fonts for their presentations that aren't universally available, and that changes on a slide. So I apologize for the look, but the important takeaway on this slide is not only does the UM system own MURR, but they actually have 2 reactors in Missouri. They have one here, and then down at Rolla at Missouri S&T, they have a 200 kilowatt reactor that they use as part of their nuclear engineering program. That's pretty unique for a university system to own 2 reactors. Up here on the slide, it's University of California, and Texas A&M says that they do, but really that 5 watt, their AGN one on the bottom of the list there, is in a storage closet and not active right now. So it's really unique for a university system to have 2 reactors. So another pride point for Missouri in what we do here. When we talk about radiopharmaceutical producers, so reactors that produce these drugs, there's only a handful around the world, which is why MURR is so important for the US in our market and need for these drugs. We are the only facility in the US and in the North America that does what we do. And you may look at this map and you say, but there's a little flag in Canada. So why is it North America? Well, Canada is coming online to be able to produce radioisotopes in their commercial power reactors. But those facilities don't have on site the ability to then take those isotopes from the reactor and turn them into an active pharmaceutical ingredient that is viable for a drug. And that's what MURR does every day. So we are still unique in North America for this supply. When we look at the operating schedule, again, they're supposed to be by month. But these are those producing isotope reactors around the country or around the world. MURR operates every day of the year, 365. The ones in South Africa or in Australia operate about 300 days a year. The ones in Europe operate between 200 and 280 days a year. What does that mean? That means that if you're only operating 300 days out of the year, that's a cumulative time of 2 months in the year that you're not producing isotopes. That's 2 months of cumulative time that patients are waiting for a dose. That's the impact. If MURR shuts down, the demand then shifts to Europe, and we have to import from Europe those drugs. So there's longer transportation times. There's supply chain issues with that. There's wait times because now we're adding more demand onto those reactors to get the isotopes for those drug treatments here in town, which means people will wait for their treatments. And if you have cancer and you're told you have a certain number of months to live, but we have a treatment that can extend your life and improve your quality of life, but it's not going to be here for a month, right? That's a hard message for a doctor to tell a patient. So we're really proud of our operating schedule and that we are that reliable source every week of the year for those patients. So what are those 4 isotopes that we talk about? The first is lutetium-177, and it's the active pharmaceutical ingredient, the API, in 2 different drugs right now. One is Lutathera and the other is Pluvicto. And these are the only 2 FDA-approved targeted radiotherapies that are on the market. So the video talked about that radiopharmaceutical that has a targeting molecule and a linker in the radioisotope compound, right? That is a targeted radiotherapy. And there's only 2 on the market, these 2. Lutathera was approved in 2018, Pluvicto was approved in 2023. So they're both fairly new, and they're both kind of late stage treatments in the cancer process. So right now, the regimen is if a man goes in and he's diagnosed with prostate cancer, they'll still do chemo, they'll do other treatments, and then they'll say, now we're going to try Pluvicto. There's clinical trials to bring that earlier into the regimen. As more data is gathered, the FDA will hopefully approve that to be administered earlier. And the vision is that one day that patient who goes in and is told you have prostate cancer, the doctors will say, we'll test for the receptors on the tumors. If you have them, here's Pluvicto. Why that's important is because those targeted radiotherapies don't have all of the adverse side effects that chemotherapy does. Because they target those cancer cells, they don't affect the healthy cells in the body, except right around where that tumor is. We're talking a millimeter or two around that tumor. That is phenomenal for the quality of life of patients, because instead of having the debilitating effects of chemo, of fatigue, and hair loss, and all of that goes with that, they have dry mouth and a little fatigue for a couple days after administered. And that's it. It's a IV treatment in and out of the hospital in a day, and they do rounds of it every 8 weeks. So it's amazing for the quality of life of patients. The next isotope that we talk about is part of a drug called TheraSphere, and TheraSphere actually isn't a drug; it's actually a medical device. So it is a tiny microscopic bead that they inject into the hepatic artery in the liver, and they collect into the tumor, the liver tumor, and stick in the capillaries and irradiate the tumor from inside via those microscopic beads. It uses yttrium-90, Y90, and this product is actually a University of Missouri system product. So researchers down at Rolla, Missouri S&T, developed the micro beads for that. They partnered with a researcher at MURR for the irradiation, and together they brought that to market, and is now owned and run by Boston Scientific. And we'll hear a story about one of the patients who was treated with TheraSphere a little later in the presentation. The next one is iodine-131. This is kind of the granddaddy of radioisotopes. The world's been using iodine-131 since the 1950s, but it's used to treat thyroid cancer. Your thyroid is the natural absorber of all iodine in your body, so when you ingest radioactive iodine, it goes there and it will kill tumor cells. The survival rate over 10 years when treated with iodine-131 is about 96.5% survival, which is amazing. It's a very effective isotope for treating thyroid cancer. And the last one, isotope that we talked about, is iridium-192. And iridium-192 is used in brachytherapy seeds, which are little tiny seeds that are used in high-dose radiation brachytherapy. Brachytherapy is a procedure where they take tiny tubes and they insert them into the organ or the tumor, and they insert those seeds into the tubes, and that irradiates for several hours, and then they take the seeds and the tubes out. So it's targeted in how they administer it, but again, it's a medical device. Brachytherapy is used to treat more than a dozen different types of cancers. So it's very widely used. So when we talk about that, last year, we treated 450,000 patients with the isotopes that we do. And to put that in perspective, that's more than every home football game last season. Now I want to shift and talk a little bit about our history. So MURR was built in 1966. So before that, in 1953, President Eisenhower gave a speech to the United Nations that was dubbed the Atoms for Peace speech. And in that speech, he basically told the world that we need to find a better use for the atom than trying to destroy humanity. And after that speech, the US started to share our nuclear secrets with our allies and partners and with universities for peaceful purposes. Our president at the time, Elmer Ellis, in 1955, had the idea, let's build a research reactor here at Mizzou. And he pulled the staff and faculty and put this committee together. And it was a resounding, yes, we should do this. It'll elevate the prestige of Mizzou. We'll be able to do leading edge research with it, and it'll be a great benefit for the university. So we started down that path. In 1963, we started construction. In 1966, it was commissioned. And on October 13th, 1966, we went critical for the first time, where we had that first sustained chain reaction in the reactor. When it first started, we ran it at 5 megawatts. It was always designed to go to 10, but when they first started, we only went to 5. In 1974, they went to full power at 10 megawatts, and we've been operating at that power ever since. The operating schedule that we run today at 6.5 days a week, a lot of people think that we started that just for the radioisotope, radiopharmaceutical need of producing that regular drumbeat of medications. But we actually started that cycle in 1977. We've been running at a 6.5-day week cycle for nearly 48 years. At MURR, we have 4 core missions. As part of the university, of course, education and research and development is core to what we do. It's why we're a research reactor. It's why we're there as part of the university. So that's very important to what we do. We also do economic development. So that is the customer service side of MURR. So it's the irradiation services that we do. Whether it's the pharmaceutical side, whether it's industry purposes, whether it's providing isotopes under the Department of Energy isotope program, which provides research isotopes to researchers across the country. But that economic development piece is important as well. And then all of that is founded on good, solid, and safe reactor operations. Because if we can't operate the reactor safely and within regulations, then we can't run the reactor, and then we can't do anything else that we do. When we talk about research at MURR, we talk a lot about radiopharmaceuticals. And you hear a lot in the public sphere about radiopharmaceuticals, but there's a lot more that MURR does. We do trace element epidemiology, so we're looking at how the body processes trace elements. We can do examination of toenail samples and little tissue samples to see how the body processes that, and then correlate that to health issues, whether that's cancer risk or the health of the body. We can do plant biology and see how plants respond to their environment and input stimuli as well. In social sciences, we have an archaeometry lab. Are you guys familiar with the term archaeometry? Okay, a lot of head shakes like this. So archaeometry is the scientific measurement of archaeology. So what that means, what we do in our lab there, well, first, our lab has been continuously funded by the National Science Foundation since 1988, which is pretty remarkable to have the NSF fund a program for 30+ years. Typically, they fund a researcher for a set research project for a set amount in a set period of time. But because we have that longevity, we have one of the largest databases of archaeological artifacts in the world. So archaeologists and researchers around the world send samples to MURR to be analyzed. And we analyze between 4,000 and 6,000 artifacts a year through neutron activation analysis. What neutron activation analysis is if you take something in life, in this case, a piece of pottery that's found at a dig site somewhere, you take a sample of that, and if you run it by the reactor, that non-radioactive material is exposed to neutrons and it becomes radioactive. Now, the decay rate on all of those atoms in there is very quick, which is why most things in life are not radioactive. But as it decays back to its natural state, we can measure the energy that's released, and each element releases a specific energy. So we can make a chemical fingerprint of that pottery. So if there's a researcher who finds this pottery in Mexico, say, an archaeologist, and they say, I don't think this pottery came from Mexico, I think it came from Peru. They may come up with a theory and evidence for that based on social science and trade routes and things. But we can show scientifically, by doing neutron activation analysis, what the chemical makeup of that pottery is. And then we can say definitively that clay did not come from Mexico, but it came from Peru or somewhere else. And then that way they have the data and the evidence to back up their theory that they may have in social science. Another thing that we look at is obsidian glass. It's a volcanic glass that native cultures used for spearheads and knife blades and things because you can put a really fine edge on it. And we can analyze obsidian through neutron activation analysis and determine the volcano that it was produced in and the volcanic eruption cycle that it was produced in. And then the social scientists can look at it and say, if it was created here and I found it here, how did it get there? So a lot of cool things we can do in the social sciences with neutrons. Material sciences, there's a lot we can do as well as we look at different materials. So we can look at magnetic materials, we can look at crystallography, so the crystal structure or makeup of metals or membranes, biolayers. We can look at materials for energy storage, so lithium-ion batteries, hydrogen cell batteries. We can image with neutrons, so it's called neutron radiography, so it's like an X-ray, only instead of using X-rays as the light source, we use neutrons as the light source. And those neutrons then are able to penetrate through lead or through a lithium-ion battery. And if you can see inside of a battery, then you can measure and see how the electrons move in that battery, and then you can design a better battery, or you can make it better. So you can do a lot of cool things with neutrons that are produced from the reactor. And at Mizzou, it's more than just the reactor. The reactor is a gateway for a lot of our researchers because it's that neutron source or it's that radioisotope source. But across campus, and a brag point for your local university, is because of what we have, we can do benchtop to bedside research and development in radiopharmaceuticals. So the Molecular Imaging and Theranostics Center is located across the street from MURR, and they're doing research into all of those different pieces of that radiopharmaceutical. So that what expresses on a tumor that can be targeted, what can we target it with? How do we link that then to a metal atom, that isotope, and what isotopes can we use that can to treat cancers? They then partner with this College of Veterinary Medicine for small model testing, large animal model testing, and then we can partner with the School of Medicine and Next Gen Precision Health for those in-person human clinical trials. And Mizzou is been making strides over the last several years to get to the point where they can do radiopharmaceutical in-person human clinical trials. And they are the active site now for a couple studies, and we're just waiting for patients to be enrolled in those studies. So the word up here that you may not be familiar with is theranostics, right? Has anyone heard that word? Okay, so the scientists made up a word. Scientists like to do that. So it's a combination word of therapeutics and diagnostics mashed together to be theranostics. So therapeutics and diagnostics together. And what that means is that those drugs like Lutathera and Pluvicto, these targeted radiotherapies, are not just about treating cancer, but they're for imaging cancer as well. So you can replace the radioisotope of lutetium in this case, which is the therapeutic, with an imaging isotope, which would be gallium-68, which has a much shorter half-life. You inject the patient with that targeting molecule with a gallium isotope on it. It will go to those tumors, whether it's prostate cancer or neuroendocrine tumors in the midgut. And then you can image it, and it's not a guessing game for the doctor then. They can say, this is going to the tumors that we needed to treat. And then they can inject the patient with the therapeutic, which has the lutetium isotope on it, same targeting molecule. And then it goes to the same spot, and then that kills the cancer cells. So it's a diagnostic and a therapeutic model for that theranostics. And that's really where we're moving to with cancer treatment, so that it's not a guessing game for doctors when they're treating patients. And not only is it the research piece, but Ellis Fischel is using TheraSphere and using Pluvicto in patients today. So it's full circle development, bringing it to market, producing it, doing the research, and then treating patients with FDA-approved drugs. So all happening here on campus in Columbia. When we think about targeted radiotherapies, this is the next wave of cancer treatments. As I started off saying, right now they're late stage treatments, but the vision is one day when you go in with cancer, the doctors will say, you have the receptors on your tumor, here's Lutathera for your neuroendocrine tumors, or here's Pluvicto, or here's whatever the next emerging drug is, or breast cancer, or lung cancer, or brain cancer, or any other host of cancers that they're doing research into. Lutathera and Pluvicto have shown that this technology works, that it's very effective, and it's much better for the patient than chemotherapy and other treatments. So there's research, as I said, happening in all of these things. And at MURR, we're looking at those emerging isotopes. So the bottom two on that last bullet there, so lead-212 and terbium-161 are two isotopes that we're looking at. And MURR in the near future will become a supply for the Department of Energy isotope program for terbium. We're working towards that. So you'll see that once that's done, you'll see a press release go out from the university with that. But these isotopes are the future of cancer treatments. And it's why MURR is so important today, and why next gen MURR is so important in the future when we talk about a new reactor. And it's not just, hyperbole or talk that we say that this is coming. These charts show what clinical trials are happening right now in the space of therapeutics for the top one, and then imaging diagnostic isotopes in the bottom one. There's hundreds and hundreds of clinical trials happening with these isotopes. And if any fraction of those come to market, it's going to exponentially increase the demand of isotopes that MURR is producing. And as the only US supply, we have to be able to provide that. Which is why next gen MURR is so important. When this was announced in 2023 by President Choi, there was universal support across campus for it. From the board of curators to the president, the need for this reactor is evident. Not only for the great research opportunity that it's going to provide, but also for that radioisotope production. And it's really going to be a generational opportunity for Mizzou and for Columbia. Having a new reactor, being able to build it as a state-of-the-art reactor. We always say when you come to MURR that it's 1960 or it's state-of-the-art 1966 technology. It's okay, we went to the moon on that technology, so it's pretty good. But to have a modern state-of-the-art reactor that's, leverages all of those lessons learned throughout the atomic era to be able to build a reactor, we envision it to be not only the reactor, but a whole ecosystem. So we'll have production space there for making radioisotopes for pharmaceuticals. There may be pharmaceutical companies who are on site with us. So instead of us having to ship that active pharmaceutical ingredient to another state to be processed, where you have that transit time, which is having that ice cube melt, we can do that right on site and take it across the street. And then they can process it and then send it out to the hospital. That allows for a less time in the reactor to make the isotopes that we need before it gets to a patient. That increases the amount that we can produce. But not only that, we envision it to have what we call a guide hall. So if you think about the Stevens indoor practice facility that they built for the football team on the hill at Providence, right? It's 100 yards long, this giant building. Picture a building like that has a neutron beam that comes down it and then splits off into 15 or 20 different national lab level instruments to do neutron scattering and other neutron experimentations using the neutrons from that new reactor. This will make the University of Missouri on par with a national lab. So Oak Ridge National Labs, Idaho National Labs, places in the country where this cutting edge neutron science is happening. We will be on that level. So it is a generational opportunity to make Mizzou even greater than it is today. And the other benefit of that is being on a university campus, there's different access then for researchers to be able to use those facilities that a national lab can't afford because of the rules of being a national lab. So when we look at Next Gen MURR, this is kind of the specifications that we envision. So we want it to be at least twice as large as MURR, so about 20 megawatts or more. Have similar flux, neutron concentration there. Have at least twice the capacity of MURR to operate on that 52 weeks schedule so that we can continue to be that reliable source of neutrons. And then to be able to do neutron scattering, so have that guide hall and to do that neutron science. The timeline is about 8 to 10 years from now. So hopefully this spring you'll see an announcement from the university about the team that will design and build that reactor for us. And that will start about a 2-year process for us to do the environmental studies, the seismic studies and other things that need to happen for the potential sites, for us to put our paperwork together for our Nuclear Regulatory Commission submission. And then we'll send that to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and then they'll have about 2 years to review. And hopefully at the end of that, they come back with a construction permit, and we can start construction and commissioning and testing. So it really is amazing. If you think about a new reactor here in Columbia, it will expand and magnify what we're doing right now at MURR. So a safe reactor in town that's producing all of those things for the needs of Americans and beyond. And we like to talk about the stuff, right? The buildings, the things that we produce, but really what it's about saving and extending lives for those patients. So this is Diana Pummel. She's from mid-Missouri, and she came to the University Hospital for neuroendocrine tumors in her midgut, the type of pancreatic cancer. And she was treated with Lutathera and had very good results from it. And she got back to doing what she loved, which is spending time with her grandkids and her favorite hobby, which is upcycling, as you can see in the picture behind her there. The next patient that I want to share a story about is Steve Reed. And Steve Reed lives in the state of Washington, and he has prostate cancer. Steve, back in the 1960s, actually was a geologist for working with NASA, and he taught the astronauts how to identify rocks. And when they brought back the moon rocks, he processed and analyzed the moon rocks. But Steve has been fighting prostate cancer since 1998. And over that time, he's undergone chemo 18 times. And in 2021, after he was undergoing his last round of chemo, it wasn't having the results that they wanted. And he expected that he was going to go to the doctor and the doctor was going to tell him, sorry, Steve, there's nothing else we can do. Chemo's not working and that's it. But when he went in, the doctor said, as you know, chemo's not having the effects we want, but there's this new drug we want to try, Pluvicto. So in 2023, he started Pluvicto, and typically it's a 4 or 5 round dosing. After the 3rd dose, he went in for his checkup and his PSA numbers had fallen from 240 to 5. And the doctor said, let's go into monitoring mode. And Steve described his side effects from those treatments as dry mouth and a couple days of fatigue. Just think about that. The difference in that treatment and side effects versus 18 rounds of chemo and what he went through. And today, Steve is still living with his wife. Now, the drug company will tell you that these drugs don't save lives. That's not a life-saving drug, that it only extends life. But to me, it saves Steve's life. And then the last patient story I want to share with you is about Nicole. And Nicole was treated with TheraSphere, which again is that microscopic bead for liver cancer. And we have a video for Nicole's story. So hopefully the audio will be okay.
6 months before my diagnosis, I was just a normal 32-year-old girl. I was happy and really just was enjoying life. The first prognosis that I received wasn't good. We were just in complete shock. I had about 6 months to live. My tumor was inoperable, and there was really nothing that they could do for me, like what just happened to me today. I didn't want to just succumb to that. I wanted to get another opinion, and when I went to meet with them, they wanted me to test out this other therapy, TheraSphere. Dr. Baker is the director of the liver tumor clinic. She believed enough in herself and her team's abilities to be able to take on a case like mine. And the best I could do was try.
We are able to give high dosage of radiation to a tumor to affect kill, and also give lower doses to the liver surrounding it, which has changed what we can do as surgeons to facilitate options for surgical resection.
I was obviously very scared. I didn't really know what to think. I had enough faith in that interventional radiology team to help me get better. When we found out that the TheraSphere procedure worked, that was one of the happiest days of my life.
When I reviewed the scans, my initial response was that it had done exactly what I needed to happen. There was no progression of disease, and we could have many options when we got to the operating room. And that's why having these relationships with our medical oncologists, our hepatologists, and our IO people is essential to be able to get the patient the best outcome.
It was because of her team and this technology I'm here today. If it was the start of a second chance for me and I'm healthy, TheraSphere saved my life.
So Nicole actually has 2 kids now, and it's about 8 years cancer-free. So amazing products. And TheraSphere has been so successful that there's now clinical trials to use it for brain cancer and prostate cancer as well. So with that, we have about 12 minutes or so for any questions. We got one from Zoom. How much radioactive waste is produced by MURR each month, and what is done with it? I don't have an answer on how much, but we allow it to decay, and then we use approved federal, waste handling companies, that then take that and dispose of it as hazardous waste.
I'm gonna switch microphones with you,
Yeah.
that's okay?
I'll just talk loud.
Well, for the folks on Zoom, you did it.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
My question is, to what extent do you think that the current changes in federal policy regarding research and funding of research is going to affect the operations of MURR? And is there planning going on for that eventuality?
So that's a great question. I think we're all trying to figure out what's happening at the federal level right now. As far as day-to-day for MURR, not much is gonna change. But as part of the university, potential budget cuts and impacts to the university, will be part of that. We won't be completely insulated from it. But we're gonna continue to produce the isotopes that we do. We're under contract to provide those to radiopharmaceutical companies. And there is income that comes from that. We actually contribute money back to the university for research across the board each year. So that will continue. As far as funding and things and support for next gen MURR, we find that there's very good support. Both sides of Congress are supportive of nuclear energy and nuclear science. Funding, we'll see. That's a challenge. We'll see how that shakes out. But there's collective support for this. And when you talk about providing a domestic supply to secure the domestic supply chain, right? That's in the lexicon of the current administration. When we talk about being able to provide cancer fighting drugs for the US that are made inside the US, that's certainly all in line with the efforts there. So, we're hopeful, and we're going to keep pursuing it. It's definitely something that I think will come to reality with next gen MURR. So.
Just a follow-up question. So can you sort of give us a percentage or a rough percentage of what income comes from where for MURR?
Yep. So for a long time, MURR was a kind of a break-even kind of operation. So we would meet our own operating expenses each year, plus or minus a little bit of margin, but not much. The production of radioisotopes for radiopharmaceuticals has changed that. There is income that comes from that. I'm not at liberty to say how much is contributed back to the university, but it's not an insubstantial or small amount, which benefits the campus as a whole and research across the board for that. As a research reactor, we have to provide a certain amount of our funding has to be for research and not just business production. So that always will be there. But we are a good partner for the university to contribute back.
You're producing isotopes that are used primarily in the US. And I assume you're getting out about what the US can use. How is the rest of the world getting those isotopes, and how close are they coming to meeting the need there?
So there's definitely more demand than there is supply right now. As these treatments become more known and mainstream in cancer treatments and are authorized by insurances and FDA for earlier use, the demand is only continuing to grow. Those reactors that I showed that produce radiopharmaceuticals, we're not really competitors with each other, if you will, because we're all supplying this demand. We collaborate very well with the reactors in Europe. They collaborate with us. So together we're meeting that demand right now in the US and in Europe. But that demand is definitely outpacing production. So we're doing everything we can to increase at MURR. There's a couple expansions underway right now that will allow us to increase the amount of lutetium that we can produce over the next couple of years. So we are a growing operation to continue to meet that demand.
My question comes primarily because I was raised in India in a hospital. And I have the feeling that there are many parts of the world that are not getting as much as they need at this point.
I think that's a fair assessment.
So I'm curious about the staffing that's required to run the lab, and what kind of credentials those people have, and I mean, the reactor. And is that used for student benefit and learning as well? And what kind of students are part of that lab experience?
So at MURR right now, we have a little over 300 full-time employees. If you count part-time employees, interns, and students, we're up over 400. The students who are there, they could be chemistry students doing radiochemistry research. We have postdocs, we have PhD candidates, there's undergrads as well. So chemistry is one area that makes perfect sense, right? With radiochemistry. But we also have students who are studying physics. We have students who are in anthropology because they're part of the archaeometry lab. We have students who are doing biology. There's students who work with the Molecular Imaging and Theranostics Center, MITSI, who are doing biomedical research. We host students who come through for tours who are radiology students or radiology techs that are doing their programs through the College of Health Sciences or through the School of Medicine. So all of those, anything that touches nuclear medicine, nuclear science, we're an opportunity to educate the students about. The opportunities there really are great because we have a lot of faculty who have dual enrollment or dual assignments with an academic unit and then at MURR as well. So that's in the College of Veterinary Medicine, School of Medicine, physics, chemistry, anthropology. There's a couple from CAFNR even, so.
I've got it.
Okay, Zoom question, we'll go here. I don't understand how the cancer cells are killed, but do not affect surrounding non-cancerous cells. Okay. If you'll forgive me, I'll geek out on science a little bit. So when the lutetium decays, it releases beta particles. The beta particles are that radioactive piece of it, and they travel 1 to 1.5 millimeters from that release point, from that atom. So if there's that targeting molecule will, when it goes through the bloodstream and it finds that receptor on that cancer cell, it will stick to it. And actually the biochemical aspect of it is that targeting molecule is drawn into the cell itself. So that lutetium atom is now inside the cell, that cancer cell. As that beta particle is released, that beta particle has energy on it. And when it crashes through the DNA, it destroys the DNA of the cell. So it kills the cell. Because they travel 1 to 1.5 millimeters, if it's an internal cell of that tumor, you're only affecting the tumor cells. But if it's on the outside of that tumor cell and it travels 1 to 1.5 millimeters, then you're going to affect healthy cells that are right around that tumor. When you look at TheraSphere, for example, when they inject those glass beads into that tumor and they stick in the capillaries of the liver tumor, it kills that tumor so that it starts to shrink and erode or degrade. Then the surgeons will go in and they're able to surgically resect that. So that's what the video was talking about, that the surgeons went in there to remove that tumor. So that's how it affects cancer cells and not healthy cells. Yep.
Can you comment on radiology's advancements in diagnosing cancer, particularly the 7T at Roy Blunt?
So the 7T at Roy Blunt, Next Gen Precision Health, I don't know a lot about it, but my understanding is that those type of MRIs is a better type of microscope, right? So if you think, I'll make the analogy to, if you remember back in the 80s, we launched the Hubble Space Telescope, right? And when it went up, that had the wrong lens on it, so everything came back blurry. And the space shuttle had to go up and do a mission and replace the lens. And when they got the lens fixed, we started to get these great pictures of outer space that the Hubble Space Telescope was sending back, right? Well, we thought that was really good. And then a few years ago, we launched the James Webb Space Telescope, right? Which is at a much higher altitude and can see much better into space. And the images we're getting back from that make Hubble's look like a pencil sketch, right? So that's kind of my analogy of the MRIs and the imaging techniques of, you know, between an X-ray or a CT scan or a PET scan or an MRI, and then the different levels of MRI is just that better microscope, better camera to be able to look at the cells in the imaging. When we look at imaging agents, they've come along too, because it's how do you inject something into the bloodstream that you can image what you need to see without it sticking in lymph nodes or sticking in your kidneys, or, you know, so that your body can process it. And then how long of a half-life so that it's not doing detriment to the body when you get that. If you notice, I said 450,000 patients last year were treated with our isotopes. That was treated, right? Cancer treatments, therapeutics. The number on the video said 1.6 million were diagnosed or treated with radioisotopes at MURR. What you notice there was missing was the diagnostic piece, right? So in 2023, the company that was producing the imaging agent with our reactor got out of the business. So we lost our partner who was doing that. So we no longer produce imaging agents out of the reactor. We still do with a site partner using the cyclotron that produces 4818 that's used in PET scans around the state. But right now, what we produce out of the reactor are cancer treatments and not diagnostic. Doesn't mean we can't go back there if we have another site partner, but right now we're all treatment. So that therapeutic aspect.
One more
One more.
short Zoom.
Okay.
How are the radioscopes, isotopes transported to pharmaceutical companies?
So the radioisotopes, that's actually one of the other expertise areas of MURR, right? Last year, we shipped more than 4,000 radioactive shipments to around the world. So the first is there's a lot of regulations that go with shipping radioisotopes. So we have regulators in the Department of Transportation. If it goes by air, there's the FAA. If it's going to go, Department of Homeland Security is interested in it. If it's going to cross the border, then there's Borders and Custom Protection. So there's a lot of agencies that have an interest in these packages when they're shipped. But the way that we ship them is we put them into a shielded container, or what we call a PIG. It's a lead canister that the lead shields us from the radiation. That gets sealed, leak tested and everything, and then that gets put into a box and shipped via FedEx. So that's a type A shipping container. So you would have your Amazon package on a FedEx truck right next to a radioactive package, and you would never know because the PIG, that lead shielding, protects the environment and protects all of us from that radiation. If we have to ship higher levels of radiation, then we have what's called a type B container. That has more a denser metal, inner and outer shell of the container that the radioisotope goes in the center, and then there's multiple levels of shielding, and that gets shipped via a special courier. But that's how we ship things around the world for the radioisotopes. And it is one of the expertise areas of MURR that we've built over the years of operating. I think we're out of time, but I will take your question after if that's okay, unless, so I want to be respectful of your time.
We
so.
appreciate it. Please let's give a round of applause for our speaker. You're welcome. Thank you to the league. Thank you again to our tech team. And just want to let you know that the next Lunch and Learn will be Wednesday, April 9th at noon. And we'll be hearing from retired Boone County Judge Gary Oxenhandler with a lot of time for Q&A. So please join us on April 9th. Thank you all for being here. Thank you very much.
So, you know, my daughter had liver transplant.